The heavy stillness of the night can play tricks on the mind, bending reality into something darker, more sinister. I learned this firsthand in 2015, during my brief stint at a local McDonald's. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I needed the paycheck, and as the new guy, I went above and beyond to impress my managers. I covered shifts whenever needed, even at the expense of my own rest. But I never imagined that one seemingly ordinary night shift would scar me for life. It was around 8 p.m. when my phone buzzed, jolting me awake from an early evening nap. My manager was calling. Someone from the night shift had called in sick. I groaned but reluctantly agreed to cover the shift. My exhaustion was no match for my desperation to earn a little extra cash. I had never worked overnight before, but I figured it wouldn't be too bad. Fewer customers, slower pace. How hard could it be? By 8:30, I arrived at the store. The lobby was bustling with the evening rush, an unexpected chaos I wasn't prepared for. Customers barked orders, the fryer sizzled, and the team hustled to keep up. By the time the previous shift leader clocked out, leaving me with only a sarcastic good luck, I was already overwhelmed. The chaos died down by 10:30, and the store felt eerily empty. The night manager, John, a laid-back, almost apathetic guy, was busy in the office, leaving me to manage the front counter, drive-through, and grill on my own. Nervous energy coursed through me as I adjusted my headset, trying to focus. The quiet was unsettling. The large windows in the lobby framed the pitch-black night, their reflective surfaces hinting at movement that wasn't really there. Or was it? Our headsets chimed whenever a car pulled into the drive-through, a pixelated, robotic tone that quickly became grating. The first time it rang, I greeted the customer with fake enthusiasm. "Hi, welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you?" Silence. No engine hum, no voice, just static crackling in my ear. I waited a few seconds before the mic clicked off. Odd, but not entirely unusual. Sometimes the system picked up interference from passing cars or even pedestrians near the sensor. I shrugged it off, focusing on cleaning the already spotless counters. But then it chimed again. "Hi, welcome to McDonald's," I repeated, forcing a smile even though no one could see me. This time I heard something, a faint labored breath like someone was struggling to inhale. My pulse quickened. The sound was too distinct to ignore, but when I glanced at the drive-through camera, the lane was empty. The mic clicked off again, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of unease. The headset chimed again, the tone cutting through the silence like a blade. My hands trembled as I greeted the invisible customer once more. Before I could finish my sentence, a blood-curdling scream erupted through the headset. A primal, guttural sound that sent a jolt of terror down my spine. I yanked the headset off, my breath coming in ragged gasps. For a moment I stood frozen, my eyes darting toward the drive-through window. The scream had sounded close, impossibly close, yet the lane outside was still empty. Gathering what little courage I had, I ventured outside. The air was icy against my skin, an unnatural chill for that time of year. I walked toward the menu board, expecting to find a prankster or some malfunctioning equipment. But there was nothing. No cars, no people, just the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Then I heard it. "I see you," whispered a voice, barely audible yet undeniably real. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the curb as I bolted back inside. Slamming the door shut behind me, I leaned against it, gasping for air. My manager, John, looked up from the desk where he was working on schedules. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, his tone more annoyed than concerned. I hesitated, unsure how to explain what I'd just experienced without sounding insane. "I heard something," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. John rolled his eyes and turned back to his computer. "Probably just the wind," he muttered. But I knew better. I tried to focus on my work, but the oppressive silence of the store seemed to amplify every creak and groan of the building. Around 1:30 a.m., I stood in the drive-through nook, scrolling through my phone in an attempt to distract myself. The headset lay abandoned on the counter. I wasn't about to wear it again. Suddenly, a draft of cold air brushed against my arm. Startled, I turned toward the drive-through window. It was slightly ajar, though I was certain I hadn't opened it. I moved to close it when, slam! The window flew open with such force that it rattled in its frame. My heart leaped into my throat as I backed away, my eyes scanning the empty lane outside. There was no one there. The rest of the shift crawled by. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound felt amplified. I stayed as close to the light and warmth of the kitchen as possible, refusing to step near the drive-through or the lobby windows again. When dawn finally broke, I clocked out without a word, leaving John to finish the morning shift alone. As I walked to my car, the first rays of sunlight felt like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of some unseen abyss. I never went back to that McDonald's. Even now, years later, the memory of that night sends chills down my spine. Was it a prank, a malfunction, or something darker, something that defies explanation? I'll never know for sure. But one thing is certain, the darkness hides things we aren't meant to see, and sometimes it whispers our name. The screech of children's laughter echoed through the McDonald's play area like a melody on repeat. It was supposed to be a normal day, one filled with nuggets, fries, and fleeting moments of peace while my kids ran wild in the fluorescent-colored labyrinth of tubes and ball pits. But what I witnessed that afternoon turned a simple trip into a memory I can never erase, a chilling reminder of how darkness can hide in the most innocent places. It all began as an act of convenience. My wife was working, and I was juggling my first day off in weeks with the relentless demands of two energetic kids, Chris and Ellie. Exhausted and unprepared, I gave in to their pleading and found myself at the local McDonald's, a decision I've regretted ever since. The place was buzzing with noise. The line to order stretched nearly out the door, and the tables were crammed with families. Chris and Ellie, however, only had eyes for the brightly lit play area. The moment they spotted it, they bolted, leaving me to shuffle forward in line alone. By the time I finally managed to secure 2 Happy Meals, they were already deep within the play structure, climbing ladders and sliding through tunnels with a gaggle of other children. I sat on a bench nearby, unwrapping my burger, half watching them while trying to suppress the nagging voice in my head that reminded me why I rarely brought them to places like this. It wasn't long before something caught my eye. A boy in the ball pit. He was chubbier than the other kids, with curly red hair and a face flushed with distress. While the other children laughed and shouted, he sat frozen among the sea of plastic spheres, his expression utterly blank, save for the glimmer of tears threatening to spill. I followed his gaze, trying to see what had captivated him so completely, but it led to nothing more than a window overlooking the busy road outside. Still, there was something unsettling about his stillness, his silence amidst the chaos. Then he stood up. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost mechanical, and as he climbed out of the pit, I noticed something that turned my stomach. His pants were halfway down, and he fumbled to pull them back up as he trudged toward a woman who appeared to be his mother. A chill ran through me. My first thought was disgust. Did he just relieve himself in the bull pit? It was all I could do not to grab my kids and leave immediately, but I didn't want to cause a scene. Instead, I let them finish their meal, swallowing my unease along with the tasteless burger in front of me. By the time we left, I'd almost convinced myself it was nothing. A weird kid with poor manners, maybe a careless parent. But days later, as I sipped my morning coffee and scanned the newspaper, the truth hit me like a freight train. There, on the front page, was the McDonald's we had visited. The headline detailed the horrifying arrest of a man who had been caught hiding in the bull pit, preying on children. My hands trembled as I read on, coffee spilling across my lap. The man had been targeting kids for weeks, blending into the chaos of the play area, unnoticed by parents and staff alike. The article included a photograph of a distraught mother being interviewed outside the restaurant. Her tear-streaked face was painfully familiar, It was the red-haired boy's mother, the same boy I had seen in the ball pit, his face pale with silent terror. My mind raced back to that day. The boy's frozen expression, his awkward movements as he climbed out of the pit. It all made sense now, pieces of a puzzle I wished I could unsee. My stomach churned as I thought of how close my own children had been to that pit, to the lurking predator hidden beneath its colorful surface. If they had gone in, even for a moment. I couldn't finish the thought. The weight of guilt pressed down on me. How had I missed the signs? Why hadn't I acted when I saw that boy's face? But more than anything, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude that my kids had been spared. Since that day, I've kept a much closer eye on them. No more ball pits, no more play areas where strangers can disappear from view. The world is not as safe as we want to believe, and moments of inattention can lead to unthinkable consequences. As for that boy, I pray he found healing, that he grew up surrounded by love and safety. And for the man who stole his innocence, I hope he faced justice in its fullest, most unforgiving form. This story isn't just a memory for me, it's a cautionary tale for every parent. We trust too easily, lulled into a false sense of security by the familiarity of places like McDonald's. But darkness doesn't need permission to creep into the light. It's always there, waiting, hidden just beneath the surface. So to every parent reading this, stay vigilant, watch your children. Because sometimes the monsters we fear most aren't the ones under the bed, they're the ones hiding in plain sight. Public bathrooms have always filled me with an unshakable dread. The thought of using one was unbearable no matter how desperate I was. As a kid in school, I'd seen how cruel children could be, mocking anyone for simply needing to go. The fear of humiliation made me avoid public restrooms at all costs. It became a habit that followed me into adulthood, a deeply ingrained phobia that I couldn't shake. This story takes place in 2002, on the tail end of a long road trip through Dallas with my two friends, Jessica and Ruby. It was close to midnight, and we were exhausted. Jessica and Ruby were hungry, and I was battling an urgent need to pee. We still had an hour before we reached home, and I'd already been holding it for over 2 hours. Jessica suggested we pull over at a McDonald's we passed on the highway. I was hesitant. The thought of using a public restroom made my stomach churn. But my body betrayed me, and the urgency left me no choice. I bolted from the car, muttering to myself that I'd be quick, in and out before the unease had a chance to set in. The second I pushed open the restroom door, the stench hit me like a wall. The air was thick with a sour, rancid odor, a mix of spoiled milk and something much worse. My stomach turned, but I pressed on. There were 3 stalls. A quick glance beneath the doors told me the restroom was empty. The first stall was revolting. The seat was soaked with urine, and the bowl was filled with weeks' worth of unflushed waste. Used toilet paper was strewn everywhere. Gagging, I slammed the door shut and moved to the next stall. This one was relatively cleaner, but reeked worse than the first. I checked the third, and it was just as disgusting as the first. Left with no real choice, I returned to the second stall. The lock barely worked, but I figured I'd only need a few seconds. I hurriedly covered the seat with toilet paper, sat down, and finally let out a sigh of relief. Then I heard it. The restroom door creaked open. My heart skipped a beat. Someone had entered. I froze, instinctively holding my breath. I wasn't ready to interact with anyone, especially not in this vulnerable state. I waited for the sound of footsteps, the opening of a stall door, or even the faucet turning on. But there was nothing, only silence. Seconds turned into minutes. My mind raced. Maybe whoever it was had left. Perhaps they had changed their mind and walked out. Still, a gnawing fear clawed at me. I needed to be sure. Slowly, ever so slowly, I leaned down to check for feet under the stalls. What I saw will haunt me forever. Lying on the grimy floor, staring up at me with a chilling grin, was a man. His face was filthy, his grey hair matted with dirt, and his toothless mouth stretched into a grotesque smile. Panic exploded in my chest. I screamed, leaping off the seat and yanking up my pants. The man began to laugh, a raspy, bone-chilling sound. He scrambled to his feet and bolted out of the restroom, his laughter echoing against the tiles. I stumbled out of the stall, shaking, tears streaming down my face. Ruby and Jessica burst through the restroom door, their faces pale with concern. "Are you okay?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling. "What happened?" I tried to speak but couldn't find the words. Finally, I managed to stammer, There was a man. He was on the floor, staring at me. He ran out. Jessica and Ruby exchanged horrified looks. "We need to call the police," Ruby said firmly, but I couldn't bring myself to agree. The encounter had left me feeling exposed, vulnerable, and deeply unsettled. All I wanted was to get out of there, to go home and pretend this nightmare never happened. As we walked back to the car, my eyes darted around the parking lot, searching for the man. I didn't see him, but the unease lingered. I climbed into the back seat, still trembling. As Jessica started the car and we pulled away, I glanced back at the McDonald's, and that's when I saw him. The man was standing where our car had been parked, his grotesque smile stretching impossibly wide. He raised a hand and waved at me. Chills raced down my spine. I sank back into my seat, unable to shake the image of his face. For weeks after, I couldn't stop thinking about that man. I avoided public restrooms even more fervently, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw his grin. To this day, the memory haunts me, a grim reminder of how vulnerable we are when we least expect it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No matter where you are, always be aware of your surroundings, and never, ever let your guard down. You never know who or what might be watching.